Pro Cannabis Media and PCM TV programming is supported by Revolutionary Clinics in Massachusetts, the #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 accounting solution for the cannabis industry. And by TCP's Style Lighting Grow Kit, all you need to grow.
Welcome back to the Green Rush Live podcast. I'm going to be your host today. I'm Josh Kincaid. I'm with the Talking Hedge. The Green Rush Live brought to you every Friday by Pro Cannabis Media between 4 and 6 Eastern. With me, we got Christopher Smith of American Cannabis Report. Christopher, thanks for being with us as always.
My pleasure, Josh. How are you doing today?
That's great. I'm in Seattle. It's not raining. No complaints. Looks like we're on the West Coast today. There's 3 of us right here. We've got Robert Laurie with Lucem Law. He's an attorney up in Vancouver, BC, running around like a madman all over the U.S. Here to talk to us about a little bit about home grow throughout North America. Rob, thanks for being with us at Green Rush.
Josh and Christopher, thanks for having me. And Dan, good to see y'all. And yeah, we got a bit of a West Coast thing going here, which is fabulous because for the last 3 weeks, I was in Dallas, Denver, Colorado, New Mexico, or Las Vegas, New Mexico, back to Denver, a wedding and a conference in the interior British Columbia, and then Mexico City. So I got to tell you, that was 3 weeks away from the West Coast, and now being back on the West Coast, we can get down to it today. So thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Yeah, appreciate it. I guess we can start with let's start with Washington home grow, because it's a felony up here, which kind of puts us in a unique position where there's such a harsh rule against it. So there is the House Bill 1019 in Washington. They're trying to get about 10 plants, but in the meantime, if you don't have a medical card, it's a felony to grow. So if you have a medical card, you can grow, and they're trying to kind of just match that with a home grow plan. And there's, hemming and hawing going on. So the industry thinks it's going to be competition. They don't want it. There's ancillary businesses who think that the picks and shovels could be opportunities. There's people on both sides who have opinions, of course. But ultimately, I don't really think any law should be a felony, no matter what, as it pertains to cannabis. So that's my opinion. Washington, this petri dish experiment kind of continues to, amaze me by the rules, regulations, and everything. But that's what it is in Washington. Christopher, you got anything on California and what's going on down there? There's always great stuff coming out of Cali.
Well, sometimes there's great stuff coming out of Cali. Down here, if you are 21 and older, you can grow 6 plants at home. And if you are 18 and a medical patient and you have a prescription or from your doctor, then you can grow also, but it's 6 plants still. I've always been puzzled by this sort of the draconian nature of shutting down home grow, with the big hammer, especially in your case, as you're talking about in Washington, where it still remains a felony. I don't understand, as a practical matter, I don't believe that home grow really threatens retail. It doesn't threaten the professional growing community, really. If I can grow 6 plants for my own use, I'm one client, one customer. I just don't see how the threat is so massive that the state has to come down so hard. I think that I think it's very, very Voldemort, very dark and unbalanced, really. And I think you're right. I would agree with you that it needs to be rolled back and rationalized so that it just makes sense with people's everyday lives.
It's fairly draconian. Even, we used to have in Washington, you could have up to 3 caregivers. So you could grow 5 plants, and then 15 plants. And then if you had 3 other people, you could grow a total for 45 plants, medical. So I feel like that was kind of, liberal. Now they kind of just went the opposite way. And that's probably because of lobbyists on that side of some of these licensee holders. And that's kind of where we're at. So we kind of have to fight that. Robert, I'm not even sure what the deal is with home grow. Was that written into the legalization? Can you grow legally?
There's a lot of points we can talk about home grow here. Maybe let me just go back to slightly a bit of the beginning of the story so we can segue into what the current state of affairs is. But yeah, Canada became licensed under the MMAR, which was the Medical Marijuana Access Regs, back in about 2011 or so, 2010, 2011, more or less, which again enabled people to grow, a certain amount of recommended cannabis under the medical program. And at this time, you ended up seeing there were doctors like legendary. You'd hear stories of, doctors signing scripts for $15,000 for these crazy amount of plant counts, as it was known. But ultimately, the home grow, they tried to eliminate that. That was the Harper government with the MMPR, Medical Marijuana Purpose Regs, in about 2013 or so. And there was a group of lawyers in the Allard case that brought an injunction effectively enabling these medical patients to keep growing while the case made its way ultimately to the it was at federal court of first instance for the Allard case, and Smith, which dealt with edibles and medical patients accessing cannabis in all its forms, was at the Supreme Court level. So effectively, these two court cases prevented more or less the government for ending home grow. Medical patients now can continue to grow or have their cannabis grown by a designated producer. Or, of course, you can access that through the licensed producer system for medical patients. And then at default, there's also recreational access. But for home grow, 4 plants is the magic number that anyone can legally grow in Canada without any real stipulation. However, if your grow is within a direct sight line of like schools and children and neighbors and a bunch of other stuff that doesn't apply to cucumbers, tomatoes, or apples, but applies to cannabis nonetheless, you can still grow 4. That's outdoor growing. Indoor growing, of course, you don't have the same visibility issues. But again, it's relatively easy, I would say, if you really want to look hard enough and go the direction, to become licensed to grow plants. Myself, I have a total of 50 gram a day authorization to possess, of which 30 of that I can grow, which when you type in the numbers into the Health Canada calculator, roughly I could grow 250 plants if I wanted to. And I mean, that's a good number because at the end of the day, it's not just medical production for like high bulk THC distillate at the end of the day. People very, very well be wanting non-psychoactive CBD. And if you're going to be producing your own oil, 4 plants ain't going to cut it. I mean, as it says in the Bible, you need 1 pound of a seed-bearing plant known as cannabis, the Hebrew name from cannabis, to make ultimately 1 ounce of a oil with the benefits. So that's what's going on with home growing. And before I just conclude, that Allard case should have been definitive, but we have 2 provinces in Canada, Manitoba and Quebec, where their provincial governments have been trying to ban home grow, and that's going to be going before the courts later this year. But the arguments in Allard for why medical patients couldn't possibly grow their own cannabis, which was disputed beyond a balance of probabilities, was the fact that fire, crime, and mold could not on their own justify an absolute prohibition against banning. So we'll see what happens. But from my view, that's a constitutionally protected activity. And the governments of Manitoba and Quebec are late to the party and didn't get the memo, and will probably get their ass handed to them with that litigation. So we'll see. Hope that's a good enough answer.
Yeah, it is. And yet, so you only can grow 4 plants at home. Washington can only grow 10. California, I mean, 6. So
And
none of that.
Italy's looking at 6 too. Sorry for jumping in there.
Yeah, and it kind of seems like all of these places are kind of copying one another, staying within kind of the same realm or whatnot, and yet that doesn't seem enough to
do anything of consequence.
Right. Yeah. So
outdoor grow, you're maybe going to get now. Look, I've asked a lot of clients that are regarded as master growers within pretty elite circles. And you're looking on average at maybe an ounce of dry bud, right, from an outdoor plant, unless you're jacking it with some unique nutrient cycle and combination with other factors. So ultimately, 4 plants outdoor in some regards may not yield much. But on the other hand, I have another client who from 4 plants is growing a ridiculous amount of cannabis in Saskatchewan outdoor with that. And, he'd be a good guest for you to have in future. But yeah, it's very different. Indoor and outdoors, like not even baseball and softball, they're so different.
Rob, you said an ounce. Did you mean a pound? 1 pound?
Well, no, actually in indoor, you could pull 1 to 3 pounds depending on per light. But I've heard that, again, the average grower that's going to grow 4 plants in a home outdoor setting, you might be looking at an ounce to possibly a pound.
Wow. That sounds really, that doesn't sound worth it.
But it's closer to the ounce level is my understanding. Again, like in the last few years, there's been some changes and advances in outdoor cultivation, but you're also limited to size. And I mean, growing these big mammoth monster plants, right, again, might fall afoul of your neighbors seeing this and then them phoning the police or making a complaint with a municipality. And chances are they probably aren't going to make it a priority, 3 years into legalization. But if they want to make your life difficult, that's the low-hanging fruit, no pun intended, to invite them in.
Yeah, I would think that a lot of the viewers and listeners to the show could maybe grow some of those monstrous plants, but the average person will probably fail at it. And so they'll make some money at these pick and shovel businesses that pop up. Like in Seattle, they were all over. These warehouses were all over the place, and you could go and get all these different things. And then regulation kicked in, and all of those warehouses are gone now. So anybody who kind of came in thinking that would stick around for a while, they realize like you could try and grow, but you're going to fail. And then you're just going to go right to the store. You don't see people rolling their own cigarettes. You don't see people making their own liquor, and you're not going to find people growing your own cannabis in my opinion.
I don't know. It depends on what circles you're hanging out with. But no, I agree with you, Josh, with that. But the price of legal cannabis, and I really want to hear what Christopher has to say about California. But I went into some legal stores in the last few weeks, and holy crow, you can buy an ounce of semi-decent, like Trailer Park Boys brand cannabis, big bag of buds from Organigram for about $100 before taxes. And I mean, that's not bad at all, right? But that grower apparently, or producer, is maybe making $30 to $50 on that ounce, when in the black market, that same ounce could probably easily go from anywhere from $100 as high as $150, right? Good quality, but that producer in the black market is going to be realizing, in excess of 75% of the cost or recoup that, whereas the producer plus cannabis is, there's many substitutes. Brand loyalty is a dream in this business. So ultimately, good news for consumers, bad news for producers. But ultimately, This is where I think the power balance is going to shift back to the lower scale, higher quality craft producer, which will be able to realize sweet spot margins that these large behemoths that are just burning resources, pissing electricity, and mismanaging water are going to be in trouble, because those commodities are only going to get more expensive and harder to get licensed for, just due to scarcity principle as we advance into the future. So, Chris, what are you seeing in California? Are prices in the legal market and illegal markets dropping like in Canada, and quality going up?
I would say, well, to the first part, the price part for sure. Prices, the legend is, we've all heard here is, it used to be that cannabis was about $4,000 a pound. Now it's about $600 a pound. So it's really a slaughter kind of thing. And in California is particularly our problem. And I've said this many times, but our problem here is they allowed too many growers and not enough retailers. So we have all the supply and a really, really tight sort of pinch point at the retail. And so the growers are getting creamed, and the bigger growers who have more money, more capital behind them are able to kind of weather the storm. The smaller people are getting creamed and also are, really, really sort of looking at the illicit market going, I don't know, it's looking maybe a little more decent over there. I mean, they're, like you said, much more masters of their own destiny over on that side. But on the home grow side, again, I think another issue is we talk about this in terms of economics, but then there's another whole issue of caregivers. And I think Josh sort of alluded to this about caregivers, right? Where, caregivers are growing a small number of plants to help serve their clients, serve their medical patients. And many of those patients can't even get out of the house to go to a dispensary and go shop or whatever. They're restricted in their movements because of their illness or their condition. So this whole draconian approach toward home growing and shutting it down is really, really having a negative effect on patients. And what worries me so much is that, especially with patients, they have so little voice, They don't get heard when these legislations are created and sort of rammed through. Well, the patients don't get heard, So these people are suffering, and then they have this sort of maybe cannabis, panacea sort of, dangled over their head, but then it's pulled back. Either it's a felony in Washington, or, the market gets kind of mushed around. So it's a real negative, I think, for patients. To me, that's one of the big problems.
Well, that's where we fought. Like, I was involved with a group of lawyers, and we sued 3 levels of government. At one point, I think I represented close to 40% of the unlicensed illicit dispensaries once the city of Vancouver decided to regulate. So, I mean, I was totally out of the closet as a cannabis lawyer the day that the city of Vancouver tried to regulate something that the federal government was saying, hold on a minute now. But, we ended up challenging effectively the government system that it could not provide for medical patients. And in fact, under the Canadian medical access system, you have to have had or have a fixed address and a credit card effectively in order to buy weed online and participate in that, which meant that if you were homeless, which a lot of the dispensaries were providing compassionate access, you'd have literally the under $5 gram of pretty decent product that, would be given or sold under compassionate access. And really there is no brick and mortar access for medical cannabis in Canada. You got to go through this very strange process of ordering online and pickup and delivery and mail order, which is very strange. And so for medical patients, it will be wonderful in Canada when we start to see more brick and mortar access, because that's how you buy everything else, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. Well, a very similar thing happened here in California in 96, 25 years ago. We had a thing called Proposition 215, which was the Medical Cannabis Act. That's the first one that kind of, knocked the dominoes and sort of set the whole thing moving forward. So that's almost 30 years ago at this point. And 20 years after that, we had Prop 64. Prop 64 had one particular a portion or component to it that made things really, really difficult, which is that there's this thing in California called the League of Cities, which seems to be very much sort of a reefer madness kind of mom group who what they were standing up for the rights of the cities to opt out of cannabis. And so what happened was a lot of medical dispensaries got knocked out, because if a town said we don't want any cannabis, well, now there wasn't any medical either. So the patients really got it. And the problem was, of course, they didn't have enough representation when the legislation was made. So they got waxed. And not only do they not have brick and mortar in their town, but in many times they don't have a delivery either.
Well,
just
doesn't
recently,
that open the door though to organized crime and
absolutely
gangs
of course
to
it
fill
did.
that void that the municipality has now created?
Of course it did. But so the League of Cities thinks that they're sort of controlling cannabis and kind of keeping it out of our town. But of course, that's the opposite of what happens. It's completely the opposite. There's still the guy who's out by the dumpster who's still going to sell to whoever, including your kids, because he doesn't take ID. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care, right? So whenever you don't have a legal regulated market in your town, then it's free, free access for the illicit market. So that's one thing. Just recently, a new bill is going through Congress to try to make sure that all of the towns in California have at least delivery access. So hopefully that's going to be successful. But here's one of the things that happens, and I think it's sort of similar to what you were saying, Rob, which was there's a town in Northern California, Walnut Creek, nice little sort of feeder community into San Francisco, very, sort of upscale community, Walnut Creek is. They opted out of having any cannabis businesses in town. There's one local business that's allowed to serve medical patients in Walnut Creek, but like you said, only with a residential address. So if you're at work and you need something, you can't get it. If you're in a hotel because you've come to visit town, for example, no, can't do it. However, all the other delivery companies in the towns around Walnut Creek do not have that regulation. So the only one who gets it, who suffers, is the one local business who's operated and licensed in town, but they can't do this. And so patients are getting their cannabis from as far away as Sacramento, which is an hour away. So now, I mean, if you just sort of picture how ludicrous it is, right? A person gets in the car, drives, gasoline, pollution, all of that, risk of accident, everything, has to drive all the way across the state, all the way to Walnut Creek to give somebody their cannabis that they bought, when there's a local solution that could do it, right? So all of this is very similar. It's all very similarly, I think, wrapped around the same issue of local control, of patient being able to be in control of their own destiny, of caregivers having access to medicine to be able to deliver it to cannabis patients when they need it. All of these things are all wrapped up together, and I don't think we're out of the woods at all.
We are out of time with this segment, though. We're going to have to take a commercial break for our mandatory 420 commercial break. Rob, are you able to stick around for the next segment, or you got to go?
No, I'm here.
All right, so we're not going to kick Rob off. We're going to take a quick break. We are here for 2 hours live. We're going to be here another hour and a half, so don't go anywhere. Stay right here with Green Rush Live.
Yeah, this is a tune I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Brodsky, everybody. There's nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. I'm going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining.
Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Pro Cannabis Media and PCM TV programming is supported by Revolutionary Clinics in Massachusetts, the #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 accounting solution for the cannabis industry. And by TCP's Style Lighting Grow Kit, all you need to grow.
Welcome back to the Green Rush Live podcast. I'm your host today, Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge. Jimmy's still stuck in line. He didn't order it online, so he's going to be there for a while at the store. Christopher Smith, he is with the American Cannabis Report. Back with us also is Robert Laurie, a Vancouver, BC-based attorney with Lucem Law. Fellas, thanks for being back with us at Green Rush Live.
Thank you, Josh.
So we're talking about home grow. Had a decent conversation in the first segment. Kind of wanted to touch base a little bit more on that because we were talking about delivery and how that's an option for caregivers. I personally stopped growing for my friend who had since passed away from multiple sclerosis once the wholesale level reached around $3 a gram, because that was how much I was paying in utilities, was around $3 a gram. So for me, that was my point for stopping. And then looking now at the retail level at $30 on everyday low prices for kind of outdoor flower, I got that for $21 on 420. So the growers may be selling that for $10 per ounce. So I'm not really sure how anybody in the illicit market is going to compete with that. We kind of were talking about that whole competition aspect in the first segment, but When I've been doing 20 stores on 420 for the last 6 years, I've noticed a couple of different things. One is that the sales you see on 420 are the everyday low price 2 years later. And that the majority of people still like flower. At least 2/3 to 3/4 of all bud tenders, upwards of 90%, depending on the year, all like flower. And the number one product being sold is consistently flower. And yet we're seeing in California where it's only 40%. A lot of those individuals won't be able to make the products, the vape pens that Robert showed us in the first segment. They're not going to be able to make edibles that's homogeneous and uniform from every bite. They're not going to be able to make processed goods in the same way and at scale for that price. So at some point, maybe you can grow flower, but if Robert's suggestion or expectation of 1 ounce per plant, that's a terrible yield. If you can only grow 10 in Washington or 6 in California or 4 in Canada, that is not enough for anybody to get by, because I can burn through 28 grams in 6 days, on a slow week. So it's not really enough for most people.
Well, the state has come down so hard on the state, I think generally, I mean, the United States really even also, but the state comes down very hard on the home grow. I found an interesting thing. I may have mentioned this before, but in a previous life, I was working in sort of the sustainability area. And one of my clients was in, call it water reclamation or rainwater reclamation. The idea being, since we're in such a drought here in California, that if you can capture the rainwater that comes off your roof when there are storms here and capture that water and save it and preserve it, then you'll have more water. You won't need as much water from the city utilities, etc. But what I learned was that in many places, many jurisdictions, saving your own water is illegal. And then I learned further, just sort of doing research, that there have been during history different times where growing your own vegetables is not legal. So I think that this home grow thing falls in that category of the government wanting to make sure that they get a little tax on every single thing you do.
Well, that's
and that greed is really hurting people, I think, in our cannabis industry.
Sorry to jump in like that, Christopher. But it's interesting, the example. Let's take it even at a high, like at a different level. But look at Gandhi, the whole passive nonviolence approach to effectively protest, right? And what was so interesting was one of the first big, I guess, events that Gandhi in his brilliant history was, he said that I'm going to walk for 4 days to the coast and I will make salt without paying a salt tax. And he started his walk and people gathered and followed him all the way to the sea. And he began on the shoreline with a process with the salt water, making salt and not paying the tax. Then he took it forward further with the whole homespun movement. Like, why are we importing cloth and paying tax and all this? We should be spinning our own clothes. So I think it's brilliant to see that people are looking at cannabis with some of these similar themes of self-sustainability, self-reliance. And at the end of the day, I think government forgot who they worked for a long time ago. And if a government, that's what scared me about the Cannabis Act, because ultimately, if you read that, it's like, if you don't get your phytocannabinoids from us, you're going to jail. If you don't get your food from us, you're going to jail. If your oxygen isn't regulated and purchased from us, you're going to jail. Like, it's a slippery slope of where government overreach with regards to the access and taxing of basic necessities is going to have to be readdressed, or it'll just lead to a proliferating underground market, as it does for any contraband where there's a demand.
Sure. Absolutely.
We talked a little bit about the disadvantages of trying to grow. It's not easy. You're not going to yield much. And yet every time I go up to Vancouver, BC, I always smell the funkiest, some of the best grown cannabis. I've talked about on this podcast as well, that in Seattle on 3rd Avenue at this bus stop across from the courthouse, best smelling cannabis every single time, no matter what. All of the people that go and congregate right there, all these locals have some of the best stuff. And I've been asking why. I interviewed a guy who did vertical agriculture with cannabis, and he was talking about, premium and really good terpenes and flavonoids and everything, and asking him, well, how are you able to do that on a large scale? Because it seems like all of the craft growers are the ones that have the funkiest skunk, the smell, the terpene, everything that you actually really want. So there's still kind of this debate on is it small craft grows that can really only grow the best, funkiest, best smelling versus large? Is it only going to be home grows or
competency of the grower? Because I think it's really one of those things that's not how they determine licenses. It really should be dependent on how large or how small to hit a standard or a quality. And look, it's a tough question because it's like, how long's a piece of string, right? But you need to really look at all the different variables and factors. But to me, I think it's how much, like when you look at large scale vertically integrated farms, they're technically like a micro scale that's just being replicated. And to me, though, are you still able with all that AI to maintain a connection with the plant and to, again, finish that to a point where the process and the maturity of the plant ends up equating to what you're saying, the funky smell and that experience. And again, I think it's possible to do on a very large scale, but the problem is corners get cut. And the large scale weed, like I used to joke and say, yeah, it'll be fun one day to go into a gas station and buy a pack of Tilray Blue Labels or whatever, right? But who's really going to want that? You're going to get that pack of Blue Labels at the gas station, if that's all you can get, but it's no substitute for something that you would buy at a farmer's market or at a small intimate gathering where people are able to demonstrate their wares without too much restriction. So anyway, what do you think, Christopher?
Well, I think it's there. Maybe this is the dividing line, though. There's another bill in California just on the very topic you're talking about, which is going to farmers markets. But their licensed growers are going to be able to go to farmers markets, and the idea is that they won't be pinched by the retail. They will have an additional avenue for themselves. But these are the licensed growers, not home growers.
But they have that in Canada too. We're going to start seeing in British Columbia. Actually, there's been one or two in Ontario, and I think the first in BC, but it's called the farm gate model. Okay. And so when you come up to Kelowna or the interior British Columbia into the beautiful wine country, you go to these like $1 billion wineries that some of them just look like new age cult headquarters. They're so swish. But that's where you're starting to see that, again, that wine over the last 25 years has been allowed to be sold out of a winery, and a certain percentage of the overall business you can sell out of brick and mortar retail under an ancillary sales license. And so the fun thing is we're starting to see that with cannabis. And I mean, how cool will it be to be able to go to certain different regions and like talk about water and pH and soil and be able to try different things? Because you see the wine people go on about it and it's just, but with cannabis, that's something that, I'll be really excited to get down to.
So I agree. I agree with you so much. Do you think it's just going to be an ingredient then? Like if you look at beer, like when you talk about beer makers, none of them actually grow it. They all get their hops from the Yakima Valley here in Washington State, and then they grow or they brew their home brew from that. They don't actually grow all their ingredients. So do you think it'll be something where they just buy the cannabis and then they, roll their cigarettes with it? Or do you think it's actually going to be an agricultural thing? And so that's question number one. And what's the market share that they're going to grab?
Oh, man. Christopher, help me out, buddy.
Well, again, we started with the concept of home grow. I think the different licensing it probably was designed to set up a system where certain people grow, certain people process, certain people sell, and it would kind of segment off those kind of skill sets. So I suppose as the cannabis industry gets bigger and bigger, then those efficiencies will start to manifest. I guess that's kind of the main idea. But again, back to the idea of the very small growers growing at home. I just hope that all of this process toward big scale, big industrial stuff that's, we know that big ag is coming, big pharma is coming, big alcohol is coming. They're already here. We know that they all have designs on cannabis, but the people that grow at home, whether they want to grow for their own personal use, like you were talking about, really skilled craft growers who may just want to grow their own, should be allowed to do it. Mm-hmm. They have a very, very tiny impact on this overall market. They should be allowed to do that. And certainly patients and their caregivers should be allowed to do that, because it's just an infinitesimal impact on this big economic machine. Mm-hmm. Let that small fraction of the population that are able to grow cannabis, which is it's not easy, right? It's not like you just sort of like put the daisies in the ground and up they come. It's very complicated, very labor intensive. So
you can get something, right? Just literally throwing the seeds and hopefully they do it their thing. But it's to finish a product, to guard it, care for it, and properly cure it, finish it. There's an art and there's skill in that, which a lot of the big corporations are finding out or learning the hard way, due to the fact that they've tried to scale and replicate something that really hasn't been tested. And I use the analogy of, I'm pretty good on the barbecue, but if I had to make ribs now for 500 people, let alone 5,000 people, that's going to end up a bit of a dog's breakfast without completely re-establishing the protocols, the steps, and the procedure to get to that outcome, without it being a complete dog's breakfast or a crapshoot.
Absolutely, especially if your starting point is a cow who's like right over there, and your job is you got to turn that cow into barbecue, right? Now, all of a sudden, now it's a whole different game, right? So it's the same idea really with cannabis grown at home, right? There are very few people who are going to be able to actually do all of the complicated procedures like you just talked about, and then go to market with it. I mean, it's absolutely tiny. So I just think that the government needs to stop focusing on this. It seems to me that a big part of it is as Josh said in the very beginning of the show, it's that sort of, or you might have said it, Rob, they forgot who they work for. I think that was you, Rob. You got that look on your face.
Well, but again, it's, you got this lobby in Canada that literally are made up of like hedge fund money, and that are effectively trying to regulate cannabis in a way that might, they thought it was going to work for them. But I mean, Canopy just posted 2 days ago that they've had to lay off 250 employees to save $150 million. And so while they're kind of jerking around, figuring out, what makes money and what doesn't, that's where I really see that a lot of these big megaliths that were big stock plays are going to, be relegated to the shipyards of history, which will be replaced by these smaller, nimble brands that, again, have a connection, but more importantly, a story. And that's where I think the farm gate model will do well, because if the weed is good and there's a story, and you're more likely then to visit or, again, establish a brand connection due to the connection with the land. And to me, that is where I think a lot of the government is missing the short-sightedness, or they're short-sighted and missing the bigger picture, in that, there's tons of industry that could come from the home growing, or, the U-Grow model, as it was called, and these communal methods of where people could be able to produce a certain amount. And again, it's no real threat to the larger established players, but you get enough of them, which is what's happening in Canada, and they're going to have to totally revisit the system, because the largest impediment to the legal market is the black market. And the biggest consideration fueling that is, of course, the medical grow and the access to grow through the medical avenue. And so just to tie this back into our topic of home grow, that is where I can see this lobby going after next and putting the medical patients in the crosshairs, because despite there being legitimate medical need, that avenue has been exploited by organized crime and 50 shades of whatever you want to call it, gray, black, or green, which is, again, undercutting the market. So the government's going to have to be realistic with inviting and including facets of the market. So you end up with what's happening in Mexico, apparently, which cartels are moving into avocados. But to me, that's the biggest problem facing the Mexican legal industry, is they're going to have to involve the cartels and bring them off the grid and onto the grid with regard to cannabis for it to work. So it'll be interesting to watch, because if you don't get it right or eradicate your competition, then you'll be beaten by it. And that's what's happening in Canada.
That's another funny thing that happens with the legislators, where it early on, I remember reading this many, many times, where if you had a record, if you had a felony record, for example, you were banned from the cannabis business. If you had been arrested for growing before, you were banned from the business. Well, that was banning the talent from the game, which was
100%.
completely illogical, right? These are people who have been growing and know how. Why would you keep them out of the business unless you have a different goal, right? Unless you have a different aim.
It's like the Harlem Globetrotters not inviting NBA All-Star players to All-Star Weekend. That's how I used to look at it. You know, the legal market's the Globetrotters, and they exist because, well, the NBA isn't allowed to play in the league.
Yeah. But home grow is such, to me, home grow is such a human level. It's such an issue of kind of just common humanity. It's not an issue of economics. It's not an issue of
America was founded, right? I mean, that's the founding fathers. All that kind of cool propaganda we hear up in Canada about the founding fathers, you know, growing fields of hemp and being self-sustainable and you know, no right to taxation without representation. But it's almost like 200 and something years later, you know, we've forgotten this, and we're allowing government overreach and encroachment to the point that we're tolerating laws that say you can't grow your own vegetables. You can't, you know, you can't have a cow co-op. I used to have a paralegal that they were in a cow co-op because they all wanted unhomogenized milk like you can get in France. And literally Health Canada showed up and like took the cow, right? And it's like, really, what kind of a threat is this to anyone other than the dairy industry?
The FDA showed up with
they want all of it.
Yeah, the FDA showed up with rifles and machine guns to farms for the same reason. I'm looking at home grow with the long-term view, like how does it become sustainable? And the only way I'm hearing throughout this hour-long conversation is if the price dumps dramatically to replicate what the Oregon market is growing through, which only has half the licenses that Oklahoma has at $3,500, but the prices for ounces are like $19, meaning at a wholesale level, you're looking at around $6.50. So if or when we have global legalization and you have Peru and Colombia and Chile coming in at 15 cents per gram and $1.30 in the US and $6 in Canada, there's going to be shifts dramatically. And that includes home grow too. But how do you keep home grow above the illicit market? I think the only way to do that is to drastically bring that price down to
the price. Because Josh, I quoted this price last time I was on your show, but according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, 1935, the year before the 1936 Marijuana Stamp Act, a pound of Indian hempweed, which is what they called it then, and they sure as shit weren't cultivating the THC out of the hemp, was 37 cents a pound, right? So, this is some major market elasticity that's going to snap back with regard to pricing. So to me, when more and more producers get involved, and finally the big boys and the pharma and the big ag giants, like there's a time and a place for that kind of production. But for the smokable cannabis that, you know, you're going to want to use for the purposes when you generally think of cannabis beyond medical use, right? The craft grower is going to be producing bud quality, of which the finished products for, like, you know, natural derivative products like keefs, hashes, different waxes, and so on, you're not going to be able to shortcut that, right? By, you know, growing and producing THC in a vat, for example. So to me, the price of cannabis is what it has been through history. It's only been the last 97 years. And but for the past 97 years of drug war prohibition, we'd all probably be growing cannabis, or large segments of society would. So, you know, to me, I think, you know, the government is desperately trying to make it difficult for us going back to how we were doing things 97 years ago.
Yeah, no doubt.
Do you know if it was 37 cents a pound for cannabis, do you know what it was equivalent for tobacco? Because I'm looking at tobacco right now at around $20 a pound. I'm thinking cannabis has to come down and match that. Do you know what it was back then?
It's a different product.
Probably way higher.
Why do we have to get to the tobacco level?
Because I'm looking at a comparable agricultural commodity with similar harvesting techniques and requirements to compare the price, not the demand or anything other than.
Oh, yeah. It would be interesting to see, like, what a pound of tobacco, if that's even how they were measuring it, right, versus the pound of Indian hemp weed. But nonetheless, I bet the tobacco would have been way higher in terms of the value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't compare it to like a non-vice, like cabbage, because the vice is what kind of puts that price. It's like if you go and price a piece of rope, it's going to be cheap. But if you buy a piece of rope for a dog, 10x, you know, the price could be that much more. If you put a vice on something, the price is that much more. So that's kind of why I wanted to compare those prices, just to see where we would be at. But eventually I think we're going to have prices come way down to kind of get that illicit market out and have some kind of home grow that has that nose. You have to follow that nose and get that funk and flavor back. But I don't think that home grow or craft grow is going to come until we have, a massive amount of big cannabis. And then from the ashes of that will rise something that people actually want to consume.
But that strategy of the strategy of trying to screw down the market, so that screw the price down so that the illicit market will go away, I'm not sure if that is going to succeed. And certainly the idea of trying to make the illicit market go away almost anywhere has been a total failure for the last 100 years. So I don't know.
It won't be from prices coming down. It'll be from competition from markets like Peru and Colombia and Chile that are already doing it at 5 cents per gram locally. It'll be 15 cents with landing costs. When that happens, everyone will have to readjust.
But hold on. Let me give you that example of where I've always been a little bit cautionary about that. Because, like, you take that $5 bottle of Cuban rum that Canadians can buy in Veradero, right? But that same $5 bottle of rum that you buy from the BC liquor store or private liquor retail is going to run you anywhere from like $55 to $70, right? So why Canada tends to do really well is we have a thing called protectionary tariffs, which got under Trump's skin quite a bit in the NAFTA renegotiations with Canada, as you can all remember. They got into quite the pissing contest. But to me, I think that's going to end up that cheap weed from Jamaica or that Mexican weed or weed from Honduras, right? I mean, unless it's absolutely stellar, it's still going to have an uphill battle comparative to domestic American produced cannabis in those legal states and in Canada. So on one hand, sure, it might drive the industry or keep prices, but at the end of the day, I think it's good weed will always be bespoken for.
Yeah.
Before it's grown and out of the ground, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I know that it's going to happen. I think home grow is going to be driven by the nose. That's what people want. And I'm looking forward to that whole segment and scene that is yet to really kind of develop, but I'm looking forward to it nonetheless. But I think with that, we're going to have to roll this one up. So Christopher Smith, you're with the American Cannabis Report. Where can people find you at?
AmericanCannabisReport.com. That's my website. I also do some interviews here with Pro Cannabis Media, and we work together on that, have a collaboration. And so we can find those on all the places that Pro Cannabis Media puts its podcasts, YouTube, etc.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Yes. And then Robert Laurie, you're with Ad Lucem Law. If people aren't in Canada banging down your door, when can they find you at? There it is.
That's I think we're backwards, but nonetheless, that's the logo. Ad Lucem Law Corporation. You can reach me at www.adlucemlaw.com. A for Alpha, D for Delta, L for Lima, U for Uniform, C for Charlie, E for Echo, M for Mother, law.com. Or you want to go old school, my direct cell is 1-604-218-1084. Feel free to give me a holler if you want to talk cannabis law or are looking for counsel to guide you through your cannabis ventures. Would be happy to talk.
He loves calls at 4:20 in the morning too, so call him really, really early. I'm Josh Kincaid.
I will forward them on to Joshua Kincaid.
Touche. All right, I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge. This has been Green Rush. Come back every Friday live from 4 to 6. But with that, we're going to have to cut this one out. So have a great weekend. Don't miss the next hour. But with that, we're out. Have a great weekend.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Cannabis Media and PCM TV programming is supported by Revolutionary Clinics in Massachusetts, the #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 accounting solution for the cannabis industry. And by TCP's Style Lighting Grow Kit, all you need to grow. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Hi, everyone. Welcome again back to Green Rush Live, the regularly scheduled business of cannabis talk show here on Pro Cannabis Media. We're here every Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and we're so excited to have a couple of guys from the Tri-State area, which is New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Although if you happen to be from Pennsylvania, there might be a little debate in that. Two guys that are involved with a conference that I will be at 1 week from today, Friday, in Newark, New Jersey, which happens to be my place of birth. Joining us is Jeff Walter, the CEO for Athletes in Cannabis, and also John Malave, who is the chairman of the Tristate Cannabis Alliance. Jeff, we're going to start with you because you are the CEO of Athletes in Cannabis, this trade show in New Jersey. How did that all come about, Jeff?
Well, thank you for the great introduction. Athletes in Cannabis started as a capital pitch raising event where we actually helped people align themselves in the ability to present to people that wanted to get in the cannabis space and help them make their dreams come true. Look, we are an event. We are a group of people that will help you drive your business to success. That's what we want to do. So incorporated in Athletes in Cannabis is a small dank tank, which I think everybody will love the name. It's called Dank Tank. And what we do is we bring in a professional capital company to sit and to listen to all the presentations of people trying to do business in the cannabis space, and so that they can help raise money on the professional level outside of the event. So we do the introductions, they give a presentation. The capital company that's going to be there this time in Newark, New Jersey is Upwise Capital from New York City. And those folks will be running the Dank Tank and hearing about 6 or 7 presentations from companies that are looking to build their business, whether that's an equity investment that they're seeking, or if they're looking for debt funding, convertible notes, or any of the other processes. And then Athletes in Cannabis did take a turn once we got out from just that specific aspect of helping people with the capital raise and bringing in capital companies to do this to a full-blown trade show and conference. So now we are a group of people that help to explain why cannabis, not opioids, and we're partnering with people from the NFL Players Congress, my business partner, Reggie Grant, former New York Jet, who is a former director of the NFL Players Congress. He just retired this year. And then you've got guys from Athletes for Care that will be present, Riley Cote and Josh Bachner. Josh Bachner is Athletes for Care's attorney. Josh will be giving the State of the Cannabis address at the event, which is our keynote address speech. And he has about a 30 or 40-minute presentation on the legalities of New Jersey. So as we all know, New Jersey is now a recreational state. And I implore everyone to come out and talk to Apothecary and Dispensary, which will be present. And they will be able to help you get involved in New Jersey to be able to purchase recreational products and enjoyment. So we're going to be having a great show with a lot of different speakers. John Malave is going to be one of the speakers at the presentation as well, and he'll be speaking on quality in the cannabis industry. So I look forward to that as well. So a lot of great things are going to happen there. Jimmy, I'm going to turn this back to you.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. I like it when I get to host our own show. John Malave from Tristate Cannabis. Tell me a little bit about what the Tristate Cannabis Alliance is all about.
So we're an organization that kind of came out of the confused market that the cannabis space currently is. Things are kind of how they would normally be in a regulated industry. They're kind of perverted and backwards and things like that. And that those inherent problems tend to cause issues with companies getting notoriety, companies, other companies seeing the value in ancillary companies, third-party companies, and things like that. And then having come into this space about 5 years ago with a firm, quality assurance and regulatory operational compliance firm, it was quickly realized that we are ahead of the game in this respect. So the co-founder of Tristate Cannabis Alliance and a friend and colleague from the industry for a while, we were actually thinking about what we could do for MJ BizCon, and it kind of just evolved into this idea of saying, you know what, we should really take advantage of the concept of the tri-state area being a unique geographic area in the US where people, migrate in and out of Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, or Pennsylvania on a daily basis and move and have their children in one place and go to. So we just thought it was a dynamic that we could really potentially take advantage of with getting some camaraderie and other organizations, because we target specifically small and medium-sized organizations within within the cannabis space in all different verticals to basically coalesce and come together from the tri-state area and say, you know, we understand this is where we need to be. We all want to collaborate in some manner to build and shape this industry in a way that it's supposed to be, it should be. And we just thought that that was just an idea that people could get behind. And the more and more that we reached out to our colleagues and associates that we've developed bonds and stuff with in the industry over the years, the more and more support that we got from them, and you know, people wanted to be on the board and wanted to contribute. So we feel that we have a little bit of a unique characteristic and some differentiating factors that separate us from other trade associations. With, you know, where we have obviously we're businesses or business interested in a lot of respects, but we also hold a lot of value in social equity, and we feel that we have certain mechanisms that we think that we can help organizations develop better social equity initiatives, because we don't think it can be done all by the government. It's really going to have to be done by the contributors to the industry itself.
Yeah, I don't know what we can rely on the government to do anymore, except put us more and more in debt. I think that's something that they're very good at. But let's not talk politics. Let's talk about the fact that in New Jersey, in the state that you both are in, it is now legal to purchase adult use cannabis. You're about a week into the sales. What's been your reaction, Jeff, to the sales so far? And then John, I'll get your reaction after Jeff.
Well, it's been absolutely phenomenal, right? So the only thing I will say on the term of politicians, they really loused this up, because 420 was supposed to be the big day, right? So they had to make it 421 to legalize in New Jersey. That's the only frustration point that I've heard so far, but it's been fantastic. I spoke to Michelle at Apothecarium Dispensary earlier today, and she and I were going over the fact that the sales have skyrocketed. Everybody is loving this. This is becoming a great thing. It is now, you know, the opportunity for people to embrace cannabis and not opioids for their pain needs. And that's one of the big things that you'll hear at our conference. That's one of the discussions that we're going to have, and we're going to make sure that it's very well known. The cannabis is a plant. It's natural. You're not, using drugs that are hardcore pharmaceutical drugs to relieve pain and stress and all of those things, which is really the idea here, to make this a medicinal property for recreational use, right? So it's a great thing, and I can't wait for everyone to have the opportunity at the show to meet John, come to the Tri-State Cannabis booth, meet up with them, and get a part of the program. Because if more people become a part of the program for the Tri-State Network, it's only going to benefit this entire community. And, I think that's a great help.
Hey, and John, what's your reaction to the opening week of adult use sales in New Jersey? And to be honest, guys, I haven't even started to look at the sales figures. So if you have any sales figures, you could certainly share them. John, what's your reaction to opening day weed-wise in New Jersey?
So I have mixed emotions. I from a marketing and accessibility perspective, it's awesome. From a milestone perspective of being a self-medicator myself for 35 years and a supporter and advocate, and yeah, it's great in that respect. But to know what we know from an industry safety and efficacy perspective, it's probably more concerning, if anything, because people have access to things that aren't as safe and aren't as efficacious as they might think it is. We tend to, I think people tend to put a lot of stake in something looks really nice, something looks really professional, something looks really commercialized in some respects. But it doesn't mean that it's really safe. And that's why regulated industries, when you're exposing products and things to people, especially some people who might be medically compromised, safety and efficacy are of the utmost importance, and why all these other industries have to have strong quality systems and things in place. So when I know that, and I know that now more and more people that are external that don't really know the industry so much are jumping out to dispensaries and saying, yeah, we can get whatever. And then to understand the risks behind it, so much so that I'm probably, this is only personally my experience here. 3 years ago, I told people I wouldn't be smoking any type of a device or anything, or ingesting anything, because of the inherent risks that people just have not identified or even know about. And coming from industries where we deal with that on a daily basis, and my whole career in a lot of respects, you just know about those risks. So they're extensive, and they just need to be documented out. So that I come from it from two different perspectives. It's a milestone, and it's a happy moment from one perspective, but then from the other perspective, it's very concerning.
Well, again, we're talking about a medicine. I'm not even sure I like to refer to it as a drug anymore. To me, opioids are a drug. Anything you can make in a chemistry lab is a drug. But this is something that is natural, that grows in the earth. And more and more people I talk to about this, they recognize God put it on this earth for a reason. Now, it's been abused over the years as far as a money-making enterprise, whether it be in the legacy market or now in the legal market. And there's all sorts of controversies going on with that. But John, give us a little background on some of the industries that you have been in, because you did refer to that, but let's let the audience hear about your background a little bit.
Yeah, so historically, I come from pharmaceutical, medical devices, life sciences in general, some dietary supplements, even some scant food, but essentially highly regulated industries, and where you're dealing with all different types of criticality in the products, that some are going into hearts and some are going internal for life-saving methodologies, and then some are just like medical devices like a tongue depressor that a doctor would use. So they're classified differently. So understanding that variability and how you go about applying these principles of safety and efficacy across different business models is really what is an advantage that I feel that our firm has, because people on our team have that experience, and it's not just in one specific niche of any type of an industry. But with that said, talking about the safety of products, like you were talking about medicine, the thing is with that is a lot of medicines come from plants originally, and then they become synthetically made. And the reason they're synthetically made is because in order to be classified as a drug, you have to have high levels of specificity. You must meet, very tight criteria for testing and reproducibility and all these other things that basically ensure that we know that when we're putting out a drug, that out of 1 million people, most of those 1 million people are going to be getting the drug that's stated on that packaging or whatever it would be. It should be every, but just in case there's some type of, failure or something. But that's really the difference between something like a medicine, like you're saying, like a plant, which falls under more like dietary supplements where they don't have as stringent requirements, to a drug like, something like GW puts out with CBD.
Right. And Jeff, one of the things that has been going on, more and more attention is being drawn to the cannabis industry because of the billions of dollars that it has generated, not just in sales, but also in tax money that can go to various state programs and what have you. Having athletes involved with this is fascinating to me. I swear once I was an athlete, but not anymore. And the point is, Sha'Carri Richardson, she gets banned from the U.S. Olympic team for using cannabis to get over a tragedy in her life. And there was all sorts of jokes about that, and it's not a joking matter. But the point is, it's not a performance enhancer, or is it, Jeff, in your opinion?
I don't think it's a performance enhancer. I think it is really a medicine for pain. I know a lot of athletes, and you'll speak to them, and just get to know them and the reasons why they use it. It's not really a drug that's going to pump your body up on steroids or anything, that it's going to be able to make you throw a fastball faster or make you to run harder. As a matter of fact, it's more of a relaxer. It's more of a calm after the storm. I mean, these guys go out and throw a baseball and they throw 100 pitches in a game, and the next thing you know, their arm is sore, right? So what do they need? They need some kind of pain relief. So everyone that I know in the athlete space is using it more as a pain relief method instead of turning to Johnson & Johnson and getting a pill and popping a pill, right? So they'd rather use the natural herbal plants and to be able to make something that is natural and consume that, rather than have somebody give you a bunch of pills that says, okay, here you go, you'll feel better in 3 days.
Absolutely. And Gary Payton was in town in Massachusetts here last week. I think it was last week. Every day it kind of runs into each other now. And it was really interesting to hear what Gary was talking about, because he admits he does not use cannabis, but understands the value it has and is a businessman. He kept coming back to that. Look, I'm a businessman. I know that this is a product that does work for his former fellow professional athletes. John, you talked about regulation and compliance. You could compare it to other industries. To me, it sounds like the testing of the product is what is supposed to make people feel better about going into a legal dispensary to purchase this product, rather than meeting somebody perhaps in a parking lot somewhere and exchanging money for cannabis. Talk to me a little bit about how regulated do you think this industry is, and is it going to get more regulated or less regulated as far as testing goes?
So I don't think testing is the end all be all. I think that's part of the perversion of the industry, where the laboratories control everything, when essentially in every other industry, the product owner controls everything. So without getting into the minutia of details about that, it's really perverted in that respect, and why we run into a lot of problems where people are sending one thing for testing and they get one result and they send for another, when technically you're not supposed to be doing that in any other regulated, like it's basically like against the law. But they do that, and the thing is that it's only going to get more regulated, because the thing that people aren't really realizing and talking about, and we've been talking about since 2017, is product liability. Like, nobody is considering product liability. People think about product liability and they sit there and say, oh, I have insurance. And that's a passive protectant from product liability. But that doesn't do anything if you have a class action lawsuit that's, a bunch of people and you have some deaths or something and you're getting sued in $100-200 million or whatever. Your insurance is not going to cover that. And even if you end up winning it after the multitude of litigation you'd go to, what's your PR campaign going to be like when you have a zillion other companies in a new lack of historical space, where there's really no long-term history that can move in and just basically take your space in a heartbeat? Like, that, can you really win that? I don't even know if that's even really feasible. If you can come back from a severe, significant, wrongful death lawsuit, like say Johnson & Johnson had or something, could they come back? I doubt it. Knowing the space how it is, it's just too volatile. But it's those type of things that I don't think people really realize. They don't really understand what it's like to operate in a regulated industry. It's like the dearth of knowledge is just unbelievable, that people are putting in this much money and not understanding the risk that they're putting their organizations at. And with federal legality, whether that's descheduling or whatever it'll be, that opens the door for everything. That opens the door for all types of legal lawsuits, all types of legal actions, people just coming in, and we're the most litigious society in the world. I just can't imagine that it's not going to be lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit when people start getting called out on all the problems that they're having, because like you asked, no state is really regulated appropriately. They're just not. And I just don't believe that most, and I'm not going to speak for everyone because I haven't evaluated everyone in depth. I'm going to say that most that I've come across, most states are not adequately knowledge based in order to basically regulate an industry. They really need a mature body. And the same thing that's why Canada has Health Canada regulate their industry, because Health Canada has experience in doing, industries that are like that, and understanding what's required and what's needed, and inspection processes and all that other stuff that we just don't have on a state level. They rely on everybody else to kind of give it to them, subject matter experts, and it's extensive to implement systems like that. It's extensive.
Right. And it's one of the reasons why, and Jeff, I know you're running an investor conference, or at least evolve from this investor conference. When people ask me, hey, what should I invest in? I say a good law firm, because they're going to make money on either side of the law. And the laws are just now being written. And what you're talking about, John, is eventually they're going to be challenged. And that's what we don't know yet, right? Jeff, what role can athletes play in removing the stigma about cannabis?
Sure. I think they play a role as in a role model. When you see an athlete that's on TV that is prominent, like a Tiki Barber or a Cameron Lowe, or someone that is on TV that you can relate to as a fan, that says, I use cannabis. And you could say, you know what, that can relieve a lot of pressure from society, just because the people that they see are okay with it, which means, okay, it can't be that bad. Let's move forward here. A lot of people in America follow their idols, and their idols are sports players. So it gives you a leg to stand on to put them on a podium. A guy like Riley Cote, who, you know, preaches cannabis and works with cannabis and helps in the industry and has businesses in the industry. Now, all Flyers fans that are looking at Riley Cote going, that was the Flyers left wing, now explains a different theory. They're willing to move forward, and they really have a different attitude, right? So that's really where it comes out to. The athletes are role models. They're significant influencers in today's society, and they play a part whether they want to or not, 24/7, 365. And some guys embrace it, and we thank those that do.
And more and more are getting into it too from a business perspective. You're starting to see it. I mean, Paul Pierce, Calvin Johnson, these guys are all in it. The former Survivor champion from Africa, Ethan Zahn, who is a local Massachusetts native, he's involved with TrueLeaf. I want to go back to something John mentioned, and it is a concern because I heard Gary Payton say this last week, and I cringe a little bit. And what he said was, no one has ever died from cannabis. Mm-hmm. Now, we all know that for the most part, that statement is true. However, there are people out there who are allergic to THC, the intoxicating chemical in cannabis. And sure enough, one of those people ended up dying from a mislabeled product out of, I think it was Washington State or Oregon. John, you probably know. Is it Oregon? Washington State. It was mislabeled, so it was human error. It got into this gentleman, I think it's a man, got into his body and he passed, which is horrible to say, okay? That now there is a wrongful death lawsuit against Curaleaf, one of the multi-state operators here in Massachusetts. If this goes to pass, is this a precedent-setting lawsuit, John?
I believe so, because this is why when you go into any other industry, labeling is critical. Like I've literally been called out as head of quality for a dietary supplement packaging company, been called in the middle of the night because they had a mislabeling and they lost a product that could have possibly gotten contaminated within another product batch. So that's like a huge thing. So that's a big thing, and why we have such control over labeling, so we don't have products going into the wrong people's hands. And I think people think that I believe there'll probably be a divergence in this industry where part will go medical towards like pharmaceutical, life sciences, and another part will go like along alcohol. But even the part that goes along alcohol, you still have to be concerned about that, because it's not, we take in alcohol, we know right off the bat it's a toxin. There's nothing good for our body with alcohol, even though we take it in and we enjoy it because it makes us feel good sometimes, but there's nothing positive about it. But cannabis is not that way. Cannabis has efficacious a basis on it, so it's obviously medically conducive.
Right. It's fascinating to me in so many ways, because they're just now starting to scratch the surface of research on the cannabis that's being sold in these legal states. And by the way, the other side of the coin, when you mention alcohol, there are too many deaths from alcohol right, in our country. Right, okay. Right. When I read about the 40-shot hazing that was done at a university in the United States last year that cost a young man his life, it just kills me, because I say if it was 40 bong hits, he'd be around to tell the story. Okay. Yeah. But he's not. And that is the sad thing. And it is very important when parents talk to their children about cannabis, they must understand that while the society is much more accepting of alcohol, it's by far the more dangerous substance. That, and I don't know how we're going to ever overcome that, because parents are so, they're used to it. It's been part of their lives growing up. And of course they learn, usually, especially new parents, they come up in that DARE generation, making drug awareness happening. And, cannabis has always been that Schedule I drug alongside heroin and LSD. And, it is far from that. Jeff, let's go back to athletes and athletes in cannabis, because I know that's why you've agreed to come on. We want to talk a little bit more about your show coming up. one of the things that I was intriguing to me when I heard about it, this is a free show. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. So for the general public, it is a free admission. We've had several companies step up and purchase tickets so that everyone can attend for free. So our sponsor companies have stepped up and made this free for everyone to attend. I'll give you an idea of what's going to happen. So 8 a.m. in the morning on Friday morning, there's a free open to the public networking session, and that is on May 6th. Friday morning next week. What's going to happen then is we're going to have at 9 o'clock in the morning, we'll have the State of the Cannabis address. That'll last till about 10:30 with welcoming remarks. Then we're going to have a plethora of speakers, and the trade show will open. And that's going to be held between 10:30 and 5 o'clock at night. Outside of that, all of that is all free. Okay, for everybody. So outside of that, there is one event at night that if people would like to pay, there is a combo ticket on our website to come to an after party that starts at 5 p.m. at night, runs till about 10 or 11 in the evening, depending on how late people want to stay. And that is on the first day. Obviously, then the second day will resume and we will have, the normal festivities. We will be hosting 2 charitable donation opportunities. One is a 50-50 raffle and 2 is a silent auction. We have some players that have stepped up and given us some memorabilia that signed Magic Johnson photograph. We have some stuff from the Hall of Fame from the NFL, and those different signatures will be available for people to bid on, and all of the proceeds will be headed to charity. It's either going to go to Athletes for Care or the APBA with the Major League Baseball Players Association, which is being run now by Cameron Lowe of the Milwaukee Brewers. And he's former pitcher for the Brewers. He played for a couple teams, and he's a very pro-cannabis charity. So we're going to be making those donations to those 2 charities. So make sure you come out, get your memorabilia, and help support the pro-cannabis charities at the same time. One of the biggest things that I would like to point out, both days have great speakers. So if you're going to be able to attend, you can come and attend the classes. You can come and attend and walk the show floor. There will be people there with some samples. There will be some stuff from a company called Juice Joint. There'll be a company there that's going to be sampling Queen Cures from Boston. There'll be Dojo Seed Co. There'll be Hydroco. We're going to have Hydrogrow, and we're going to have many other companies there that are going to be present. Apothecary and Dispensary will be present, so you can have opportunity to really meet some true players in the industry and to learn a little bit at the same time. And we do hope that each and every one of you find our free tickets. There's over 400 available that are still left. And we have a great number that are already taken. So we look forward to you all attending and enjoying the opportunities to participate in the legal market.
And you have to register to get that free ticket though, right?
Yes. So what you do is you go on the Eventbrite page, and you can find that by going on www.athletesincannabis.com, athletesincannabis.com, click the red register now button, and then you will find that it takes you to the Eventbrite page, and any of the free tickets are available through any of our sponsors. And you'll see each sponsor has their own name and their own allotted amount of tickets that they paid for.
That's great. I think you're going to have a real big crowd. I mean, you've got crowd control, I'm sure, in the back of your mind going, we have to make sure you do control that crowd, right?
Absolutely. Let me give you one great thing about the location that we are at.
Yep.
We picked a Hilton property that is right outside of the Newark Liberty International Airport, which means the same shuttle bus will take you if you take the bus in from the city, the airporter, to the airport. If you take New Jersey Transit in from New York City or anywhere in New Jersey, and then also Amtrak from anywhere from DC to Boston, they all stop in between, and also the flights. So anyone from the United States should have an easy time of getting in. And of course, last but not least, you can always drive, and we have plenty of parking. This hotel has 2 parking lots that can suit all of your needs. So we look forward to having everyone, and we hope we made it logistically feasible for each and every one of you in the tri-state region to come, whichever tri-state region you may participate in.
Yeah, whether you're including Pennsylvania in that or not. I got my lesson at the beginning of this. I do. Hey, John, I want to go back. Can we talk a little about Athletes for Care? Which one of you guys is going to be more comfortable talking about that?
We can split it. It doesn't
I
matter.
think that'd be Jeff.
All right, Jeff. So I'm going to
Okay.
throw you back at.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about Athletes for Care as a foundation, what they do.
Athletes for Care helps a lot of different people, and they're the recognizable brand, if you will, promoting cannabis and not opioids. That's one of the biggest things that Athletes for Care really wants to teach people is you can use cannabis in place of opioids. And, you know, they are a group of former retired athletes that have bound together to create this. Ed Snyder actually created it when he was living. He's the former owner of the Philadelphia Flyers.
I know.
So Ed Snyder created the charity, and today his legacy is lived on by his daughter, who's running it now.
That's interesting. I met Ed Snyder in the 80s in Portland, Maine, because the Maine Mariners were the Philadelphia Flyers minor league affiliate back then. And
Nice.
I just remember that. That tells you how old I am, basically. Another story. I want to talk in generalities, if you will. When something goes wrong in this industry, maybe there's a research study that is not flattering to the industry, where maybe there's a human error. It tends to make headlines. It makes headlines in a lot of the traditional media. But what isn't balanced on that is any stories how cannabis has saved people's lives, cannabis has changed people's lives. It's definitely more. It's almost like the industry is truly under a microscope to not screw up. And I'm going to use Mike Tyson as an example. He's an athlete who's in the industry, and he got accosted on an airplane. And needless to say, he struck back because he was defending himself. Now, you know what happens when that happens is you put the eyewitness news, the camera goes on, and all you see is Tyson pounding on this guy. You don't see what caused him to go off. And it becomes, again, it becomes kind of an embarrassment for the industry when you've got people like Mr. Tyson, Mike Tyson, in the industry. John, is the industry being held to too high a standard?
I don't know. I think in some respects it needs to be held to a higher standard, and then in some respects, socially, maybe not. Like we shouldn't be, I don't think, categorizing the industry based on what Mike Tyson does.
Right, exactly.
It's no different for anybody in society. But I think I think the conditioning over the past 50 decades or 5 decades, 50 years for anti-drugs and everything that's come along with it, it's just been ingraining in a lot of respects. It's hard to break people out of it, and it's amazing that people are still believes a lot of the nonsense that's been propagated throughout society and throughout my history as a person. I remember doing research in college and trying to find studies just to counter basically the negatives that were being put out, propaganda that was being put out by the federal government at that time. And the only place you could find anything like that was from studies overseas. They were from Europe or something like that. And still, it had nothing to do with the efficacious and medicinal value of cannabis. We got a whole half a century just thrown out the door and not being able to find a lot of this information out. So I think that, standards, I think internally for manufacturing and things like that, I think the standards need to be significantly raised and controls. And I think, from societal point of view, it needs to be kind of thrown away and be like, listen, cannabis covers all spectrum of demographics, and anybody and everybody utilize cannabis. So it's something that I think is silly. It's honestly just silly.
Yeah, and it is silly, but it's part of our world right now, and those in the industry have to figure out a way to maintain a great example. This is a new industry, and a lot of new industry makes mistakes. There are certain things that happen with any new industry, but cannabis, I think, is still being held under that microscope, and it's really unfair. I mean, there's a lot of unfair compliance issues that are available in the cannabis industry. The biggest one is the fact that it's all cash, so there's no access to banks, and you can't write off any regular business expenses, the 280E clause. So it is a true challenge to be in this, but the people that are in it are so passionate and they're really trying hard to get it right. Jeff, I'm sure you have an anecdotal story about that somewhere.
Well, of course. And you know, here's the deal. Everybody wants to do good. And let me go back to a point that was made earlier and about the athletes, because athletes are just like us. They're human beings. You're going to have some great guys that want to carry the banner of respect and tradition and to help people grow within society. And then you're going to have guys like Mike Tyson who have a brand, have a place in this market, have a complete fan base that has nothing wrong with that. And they're going to do things that are going to make your eyebrows raise and go, I don't know about that. Okay. But can you really focus that onto the cannabis industry as a whole? No, because there are people out there that support the, you know, other industries, and there are other athletes that do things. And it's no different than Mike Tyson carrying a logo on his chest when he's walking around, you know, supporting another industry. Guys that wear Under Armour in sports and get the contract for Under Armour, you know, they sometimes do the right thing, sometimes they don't. So to me, the cannabis industry should not be judged based on someone like a Mike Tyson. And, you know, that's kind of really where it's at.
Absolutely. And John, you and I have talked about the challenges of, because we're all humans, we tend to be enticed by various things, let's just say normal human behavior. It's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, the human condition is the failure of everything, in my opinion. Whether it's economies or whether it's societies or whatever it'll be, we always fail it. So until we start to, you know, take our lessons learned and move forward, and I think that's part of the impetus with Tristate Cannabis Alliance. Like, we're a trade association, a not-for-profit, but ultimately we feel that we're rooted also in social equity, because that's a huge component within this space. It's something that if people can't ethically look at that, they're making money on the backs of all these people that have basically suffered and are still suffering. There's still people in prisons and jail because of this plant still, while people are making millions and billions of dollars. Then I think you're going to fail at the social responsibility aspect of it. And that's something that we feel is a strong factor within our organization. We all feel that we have some level of social responsibility to basically help those that, you know, have been disadvantaged in some manner and give them the right tools that are needed. And it, you know, it's not just entrance into the game. It's not just, getting ahead on applications, which are all great. And, you know, those are all things that are advantageous from the entrance point of view. But, you know, how do you get them to build a sustainable business and understand what it's really like and have the acumen and the skill sets that are required to actually survive in a business when how many businesses fail out of how many businesses, right? That's just a normal dynamic there. So I think it's a challenge, but I think we all have to be committed, and why we believe that it's not going to come via just the government. Not that I think the government's all bad, just that it's not going to come via the government. I think it's really going to come with a combination of government support and then also, industry support. Companies are going to have to basically take that responsibility on themselves too.
Right.
Well,
go ahead,
if
Jeff.
I can add one piece to that, that's another reason why we evolved from Athletes in Cannabis being just focusing on the investment piece to bringing in the other companies to help them evolve. So for example, if you come to our show, you're going to be able to meet with people from the insurance industry, the merchant processing industry, the ATM industry, the security industry, all of the things, the payroll industry. We bring all those people together in a house and say, okay, you know what? If you're not sure how to run your new business, here's an opportunity for you to go and talk to the professionals who are willing, ready, and able to work in this space. And those people are there to guide you, because there's not every insurance company is going to work with cannabis just because. Not every payroll company is going to take on cannabis just because. But what our goal is to give you a platform to be able to succeed. And that's why we bring everyone together, so that everyone has the opportunity that's the same, irregardless of your past.
Right. It is a great opportunity for those who have been most affected by the failed war on drugs. And I, for one, I talk about this all the time. I'd really like to see those multi-state operators start to introduce programs that are workforce development programs, social equity programs, freeing up some capital so that they can get into the business and have a fighting chance to make it after they've paid the ultimate price, if you will, that they've been busted for weed, whether they're just carrying a couple of joints and they're getting years of incarceration. It has been unfair, and they're trying to right those wrongs, but nothing happens fast enough as far as I'm concerned. And I'd like to see that move faster.
Well, and also, Jimmy, I'd like to add, and I think this is also where athletes can, because you had asked Jeff that question, but I had some response to that. I think athletes can play a part in shaping the stigma of cannabis by coming out and obviously vocalizing their support of it, why they find it, advantageous, being educated on the plant and the value of it itself, but then also holding their standards for whatever companies they support, or if their own companies or whatever it'll be. Making sure that they're producing safe and effective products, that they're differentiating their brand from everybody else and saying, listen, we understand these are going into our fellow teammates or something like that, potentially that are potentially at risk. So we hold ourselves at a higher level or a higher standard. And I think that's a pretty important thing, moving forward, that athletes can definitely do.
Fantastic.
Jeff, with you on that 100%. You well said, and thank you.
All right. So I think we're going to wrap this up because you guys have been great. We've talked about a lot of things. Jeff, one more time, where can people find out about this event and how do they log on and all that neat stuff?
All right. So very simply, folks, athletesincannabis.com. We'll have a red register now button on our website. Once you go to that website, it'll take you to the Eventbrite page. The dates for the event is May 6th and May 7th. It is at the Hilton in Newark, New Jersey. Spring Street, 1170 Spring Street. And what they could do, what everybody could do is just register online, grab your free tickets. Once you put your information in, doesn't require a credit card, it'll be sent to you via email, and you'll have the whole schedule and everything there. It'll tell you exactly what time to be there, what time it starts, what time it closes. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to call me. My number is 215-688-3075. Again, 215-688-3075. I will help you personally get involved. We'd love to see you, each and every one of you, at the show. And thank you, Jimmy, for having us on, because this has been a great platform to not only promote athletes in cannabis, but also the Tristate Cannabis Alliance. And my goal is that I hope that each and every one of you who attends our show will meet with John, come out and listen to him speak, and have an opportunity to really become a part of the networking opportunities from the Tri-State Cannabis Alliance. So
Fantastic.
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, John, for being a supporter of us.
John Malave, Jeff Walter, thank you both for joining us here on the end of the Green Rush Live program that we run every Friday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time. And I always end all my shows and everything with the same line. It's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Stay tuned for Weed Talk News. That's coming up next on Pro Cannabis Media. Have a good weekend, everybody. Coming up on Weed Talk News this week.
Right now, nearly a dozen Senate committees are working hard at helping draft this bill. It'll be comprehensive, and I promise we will introduce this important piece of legislation before the August recess.
New York Senator Chuck Schumer misses his own spring deadline for a federal cannabis reform bill. Plus, President Biden grants clemency for dozens of cannabis felons fulfilling one long-awaited campaign promise. And close to $1.9 million of cannabis products are sold in New Jersey on their opening day of adult use. Just one of the many cannabis-friendly states from coast to coast to set sales records on April 20th. Weed Talk News goes coast to coast with its weekly roundup of news stories next. Pro Cannabis Media original content is supported by Salient Systems, your trusted name in video surveillance for the cannabis industry, and by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, CPA services for the cannabis industry, and by Stylighting.shop. Log on today to get your grow kit.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto reporting for Pro Cannabis Media. 420 has come and gone, and so has the self-imposed spring deadline for U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer to introduce a federal cannabis reform bill. The senior senator from New York is still determined to get this done before the August recess, and said so in a recorded statement for the National Cannabis Policy Summit.
Not only would this legislation end the federal prohibition on cannabis, it would also expunge records of federal cannabis offenders and finally reinvest in communities decimated by the war on drugs. Right now, nearly a dozen Senate committees are working hard at helping draft this bill. It'll be comprehensive, and I promise we will introduce this important piece of legislation before the August recess.
Not to be outdone, President Joe Biden finally made good on a campaign promise. The president granted clemency to 75 previously convicted cannabis felons by commuting their sentences to time served. For the rest of the news in Washington, D.C., here's Vote Pro Podcast's Phil Adams.
Hi, this is Phil Adams with Vote Pro Podcast, here with the Weed Talk News DC Report. The nation's top prosecutor said this week he believes enforcing federal cannabis law is not an efficient use of limited federal resources. Attorney General Merrick Garland told lawmakers at a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee hearing, quote, "The Justice Department has almost never prosecuted use of marijuana, and it's not going to be." Garland's comments are consistent with the testimony he gave during his confirmation, in which he invoked the Obama-era Cole memo. In 2013, then Deputy Attorney General James Cole issued a memorandum stating that the department would not enforce federal marijuana prohibition in states where cannabis has been legalized in some form. The American Bankers Association sent a letter to Senate leaders urging inclusion of banking protections in the pending manufacturing bill now headed to conference. The ABA, along with affiliated associations from all 50 states, said passage of the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act is, quote, urgently needed and widely supported. The House version of the bill, the America Competes Act, already includes language from the Safe Banking Act. That language was stripped, however, from the Senate version. A new study finds that states that have enacted cannabis legalization have seen less potentially dangerous driving behavior compared to states where cannabis remains illegal. Researchers at RTI International, an independent nonprofit research institute, found that states where prohibition persists are more likely to have impaired drivers on the road. One potential explanation cited was that cannabis users in legal states may be getting more information from physicians and dispensary staff about the risks of driving under the influence of cannabis. Another possible contributing factor are labeling requirements of legal cannabis products that warn users against getting high before getting behind the wheel. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
The week of 420 saw many states set new sales records, and since New Jersey launched its adult use market last week, of course, it set its one-day record of close to $2 million in sales. So with more from the Garden State, here's Jill Goldsberry with our New Jersey report.
Hey everyone, I'm Jill Goldsberry with the New Jersey Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And after nearly 2 weeks of recreational retail cannabis sales, the tallies are in. Over 12,000 people headed to dispensaries and bought nearly $2 million worth of cannabis and cannabis-related products. And according to the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission, supplies are effectively serving the medicinal cannabis community and the adult use consumer. Advocates expect the market will eventually exceed $2 billion a year. That's some heavy green right there. Now that New Jersey is open for business, what are New Yorkers doing? Well, according to a recent New York Times article, we shouldn't expect a rush of the reverse pipeline of New Yorkers flocking to the Garden State for cannabis purchases. Why? Well, currently there aren't any operational dispensaries in areas like Jersey City or Hoboken that are easily accessible to New Yorkers. So the good news is Hoboken is actually set to open its very first dispensary this spring. And applications have poured in from Jersey City to get things rolling even faster. And last Thursday, Hoboken's Cannabis Review Board meeting had their board meeting and voted 2-1 in favor of applications of an application from Blue Violet LLC, which aims to open the very first micro business cannabis dispensary. It'll be located at 628 Washington Street, and they'll be joined by 2 other dispensaries. Last year, the regulatory board approved licenses for two other medicinal dispensaries that were previously approved at the local level. Terrapin plans to open at 86 River Street, and Harmony Dispensary will be located at 95 Hudson Street, Hoboken, New Jersey. So look out for those. And I'm Jill Goldsberry with the New Jersey Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News.
Next week in New Jersey, Pro Cannabis Media founder Jimmy Young will be taking part in the Athletes in Cannabis trade show in Newark. The CEO of that event is Jeff Walter, and he'll be featured in Friday's Green Rush live show. So here's a preview from Jeff.
We are an event. We are a group of people that will help you drive your business to success. That's what we want to do. So incorporated in Athletes in Cannabis is a small Dank Tank, which I think everybody will love the name. It's called Dank Tank. And what we do is we bring in a professional capital company to sit and to listen to all the presentations of people trying to do business in the cannabis space, and so that they can help raise money on the professional level outside of the event. So we do the introductions, they give a presentation. The capital company that's going to be there this time in Newark, New Jersey is Upwise Capital from New York City. And those folks will be running the Dank Tank and hearing about 6 or 7 presentations from companies that are looking to build their business, whether that's an equity investment that they're seeking, or if they're looking for debt funding, convertible notes, or any of the other processes.
Another state cannabis market that continues to thrive is Michigan. One of the theories for the success of cannabis adult use sales in that state is the educational programs that refute the reefer madness stigma. One of the leading advocacy groups in the US is NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And Rick Thompson is the executive director of NORML, and he has our Michigan Cannabis Report.
This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Well, many people in Michigan are speaking out against the cannabis regulatory agency's refusal to allow certain statistical and analytical data to be released. In a new MLive article, reporter Gus Burns says his FOIA request for information on routinely conducted lab comparisons was denied based on privacy concerns. Many licensed operators, including the testing labs themselves, would like this information for a variety of purposes. Some statistical data contained within the metric cannabis tracking system is not available to the public, but other stats are, which makes their critics complain that the CRA is selectively holding back information which the industry and consumers could use to make better business and purchase decisions. Well, our 420 holiday in Michigan was a very successful one for cannabis retailers indeed. The Cannabis Regulatory Agency reports $15.5 million worth of regulated market cannabis was sold on Wednesday, the 20th of April, in both the medical and recreational market in Michigan. That's a 45% increase over last year's totals. Now, this includes more than 2 tons of cannabis flower and more than 140,000 cannabis vape cartridges sold on a single day. The government raised more than $2.5 million in recreational cannabis excise tax and sales tax on just 420 alone. Now, Traverse City, one of Michigan's northern population centers and a wonderful place for year-round tourist traffic, is struggling with their adult use cannabis licensing scheme. Council seems stuck on fixing a specific number of cannabis licenses into the city limits, which is a pathway that has led other municipalities into courtroom brawls. Think of Detroit, for example. Other voices are advising Traverse City to avoid license caps completely and allow however many cannabis businesses can fit within their already established zoning protocol, which is the fastest and less litigious way to get cannabis businesses up and running. It's also an invitation for the state's powerhouse mega corporations to buy their way into market dominance. There are no easy answers. The popular community will struggle with this decision, and we will keep you updated. Now, our final story today: what are the top cannabis strains being sold in the United States of Can-America? Well, that information was delivered by the wonderful Madeline Scanlon from the Brightfield Group, and they appear in the current issue of Cannabis Business Times. First of all, don't call them strands. It's just wrong. Second of all, don't call them strains either, says Madeline, who likes to refer to the different types of cannabis as cultivars. Without further delay, the top 5 strains mentioned by Madeline are: in 5th place, Sour Diesel; in 4th, Blue Dream; in 3rd is OG Kush; and 2nd is Gelato; and the top cultivar in our nation is Wedding Cake. It seems wedding cake is more popular than actual weddings nowadays. Now let's delve a little bit further into those numbers too. Wedding cake was the top of the crop for flower and pre-rolls, but the vape cart market is dominated by Blue Dream and the Kush. The disposable vape cart market is led by Gelato and Sour Diesel, and Gelato is the top strain in the wild and wacky world of concentrates. Madeline explains that when determining the top numbers, each sub-cultivar of the original was considered. For example, Sunset Gelato or Lemon Pound Cake. Now, you can find more information in the current edition of the Cannabis Business Times, and I will still call them strains because I'm not a robot. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
In Missouri, the clock continues to count down to a deadline of May 13th. For the Cannabis Freedom Act to be voted on. A Republican-led initiative is looking to legalize adult sales, expunge records, open social consumption locations, and allow state cannabis businesses to claim tax reductions in the state. Here's our Missouri reporter, Brandon Jones, with the latest.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones again from Distribution Maven, your Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And yeah, May 13th is getting here really quickly. We're all getting excited to see if we can actually get recreational passed here, and we're very happy to have the support of Representative Ron Hicks. I did actually get to hang out with him this last Saturday at the B420 event put on at the West Bottoms. It was a great event, a lot of turnout, a lot of people getting their medical cards. It's a great event for a lot of education, vendors, and stuff like that. It was really good to see Kansas City's events are taking off. And then my second story here is out of Grown In. So Illicit, which I'm rocking right here, is a very cool company here in Missouri. They're one of the largest cannabis producers here in the state. And they've actually teamed up with the Last Prisoners Project for the Freedoms Campaign. And what this is, the last 8 prisoners that were recently released from cannabis crimes, they're trying to help support them. So they're going down to Tech Nine's recording studio and having all 8 of them do about an hour about their story, what happened, why they were arrested, how they got out, their incarceration, all that time, and trying to raise up to $100,000 to help with their attorney's fees and get them back on their feet once they get out into the the real world here and get them some housing and just try to figure out how we can support them. So big ups to Illicit. Last Prisoners Project's always doing great things. So Missouri doing another good thing. My last story is obviously talking about the 420 sales here. We jumped up to 2.85 million for the day. We have just reached the $1 million a day month. $1 million a day just last month. So it's pretty exciting to see it almost triple on 420. So everybody, again, Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven for Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Stay medicated and educated. Have a great week, guys.
The news from California continues to be troubling for the cannabis market. Right now, the wholesale price for a pound of cannabis is the lowest it's been in 4 years. That's when the adult use market was opened. And at the time, it was thought to be the beginning of a golden age of cannabis in California. But however, it has been anything but because of overabundance of product. The host of the American Cannabis Report, Christopher Smith, has the latest from the Golden State.
Greetings from the center of the cannabis universe, California. I'm Christopher Smith, and this is the California Roundup for Weed Talk News. I've reported several times here on Weed Talk News about how the California regulatory regime, as approved by Prop 64 in 2016, has driven many of our cannabis community up onto the rocks. The simplest explanation is we have too many growers and not enough places to sell product. AB 2691 is written to help legal cannabis farmers who grow less than 1 acre get consumer recognition for their unique products, much as has been done for craft beer, artisanal wine, and other family farm agricultural products, by selling their own goods at farmers markets about 12 times a year. Giving these smaller farmers opportunities at locally approved events to expose the public to their products increases consumer choice and offers farmers a better chance to reach retail shelves, which of course is their ultimate goal. This is not about circumventing retailers, but about growing the industry overall. This bill has a lot of support among my peers here in the California market. Speaking of broken gears in Proposition 64, another was the right for municipalities to opt out of cannabis completely, which broke the 20-year-old contract with the voters called Proposition 215 that legalized medicinal cannabis for California patients. I reported on this bill about a month ago, which will force medicinal cannabis to be available everywhere in California, either by dispensary or by delivery. The good news is that State Senator Scott Wiener's bill has passed a committee vote, and now it's on to appropriations for consideration. Says Wiener, when cities ban purchasing medicinal cannabis, it denies access and fuels the illegal market. SB 1186 restores medical cannabis access for those who need it. And if successful, this could become a template to solve the opt-out problem that many other states are facing. Now, heading into another brutally dry summer, struggling cannabis growers in California could be excluded from the state's latest assistance plan to save water. A proposal by Governor Gavin Newsom would pay farmers not to plant crops. This is known as fallowing. And this year, as drought conditions worsen, this is even more important than ever. The fallowing proposal aims to cut production of water-intensive crops, such as rice, alfalfa, and nuts. Some advocates are upset because cannabis is not on the list. Our Department of Cannabis Control pointed out that the policy is in very early stages of development, and the DCC will fight for our industry. They say. Let's keep an eye on that one. Speaking of fighting, ever since she battled mixed martial arts legend Ronda Rousey in the very first women's match in the UFC 9 years ago, San Diego-based flyweight Liz Carmouche has been chasing a championship belt. Now, after 24 professional bouts, she's finally defeated Juliana Velasquez with a 4th-round TKO at Bellator 278 for some hardware to call her own. Carmouche is a former Marine known as the Girl-rilla who has used CBD for years in recovery for this most brutal sport. Now, I interviewed Liz several years ago in New York, and I can tell you, as a person, she's great. As a cannabis spokesperson, she is very compelling. And as an athlete, she's absolutely intimidating. Congratulations, Liz. I'm Christopher Smith, publisher of the American Cannabis Report, bringing you the California Roundup on farmers markets, farmer support, fixing Prop 64, and fighting flyweights for Weed Talk News.
Remember the story about the Florida wedding where the bride and caterer got caught spiking the wedding meal with weed? Well, both parties were charged this week for what was thought to be a harmless prank. Cannabis News reporter Heather Ullman has that in our Florida report.
We're back with the We Talk News Florida report. I'm Heather Ullman from Cannabis Law Report. You could legally have your cannabis wedding cake in Florida and eat it too, with the help of a tenacious and sober event planner, but you cannot drug your guests. Despite that seemingly common sense fact, recent bride Dania Spodbeta hired a holistic plant-based chef and caterer to prepare her wedding food. Approximately 35 guests at her February wedding unknowingly ate food like pudding shot desserts, chocolate-covered strawberries, and even lasagna that all contained THC. Right after the catering staff had either left or were starting to drive off, several attendees called the Seminole County Fire and Rescue and reported feeling fidgety, stoned, and weird. Some experienced stomach pains and vomiting, with 2 individuals telling deputies at the scene they suspected the food was laced with cannabis. Then they requested transport to South Seminole Hospital. At least 3 others pressed charges, and 2 people were noted as too incoherent to give a written statement to police. Nearly 2 months after the first responders assisted multiple people at the Longwood wedding party, the bride and her caterer, Jocelyn Grant, were arrested last Thursday in the Central Florida town of Sanford. The arrest report says several people did test positive for THC, but the guests had not been warned about the laced food. Samples of the food were collected and tested positive for THC. Both women were charged with misdemeanor culpable negligence, a felony charge of delivering marijuana, and a felony violation of Florida's Anti-Tampering Act. On Wednesday, Florida Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services Nikki Fried announced the inaugural Cannabis Equity Summit to take place June 17, 2022, at the Urban League of Broward County in Fort Lauderdale. This is sponsored by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. The one-day summit will concentrate on the theme Accessing Opportunities and Overcoming Obstacles, and it is an opportunity to recognize the inequities that exist. Fried told reporters that, quote, "We need to work together as a community to increase access to the cannabis industry and state legal programs, push for full legalization, and strive for restorative justice for communities impacted by the failed war on drugs." In other news, on Wednesday, Governor DeSantis signed SB 768, which the House and Senate unanimously passed in March. The bill addresses issues involving licensing of medical marijuana treatment centers and prevents the department from renewing the licenses of centers that have not started to grow, process, and sell medical cannabis by the time their license is up for renewal. The bill will also expand the authority of the department to collect samples of all marijuana products for testing purposes rather than just edibles, which is what they can do now. The measure also creates an exception to criminal laws to clarify that department employees can possess, test, transport, and dispose of cannabis in the course of their jobs. That's a wrap for the We Talk News Florida Report. I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report, and for now, I'm avoiding spring weddings.
Now that the word marijuana has been stricken from the Washington State Code and replaced by cannabis, that state is focused on making sure they get the tax revenue generated by sales. And that has caused some issues between counties and towns. Talking Hedge host Josh Kincaid explains in our Washington State Report.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for We Talk News. States that legalized cannabis for adult use collectively generated more than $3.7 billion in tax revenue in 2021. That's a year-over-year increase of 34%. A decade ago, voters in Washington State approved a ballot initiative approving the legalization of cannabis. Fast forward 10 years, and the state's 2021 cannabis tax revenue totaled almost $631 million. But the verdict on legalization has been a lot stickier than it looks. Yes, cannabis raised more than $500 million annually in tax revenue, more than double that of liquor sales, but local governments missed out. The state's budget loved it, but not so much for the counties. The states decided that they wanted to keep the money. In fact, less than 3% of the revenue last year went to local governments. Next week, you guys are going to find out more about Washington State's cannabis scene. But with that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge reporting for We Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
Connecticut lawmakers have set their rules on advertising for the cannabis industry, which is still waiting to launch. So you won't see any leaves on any billboards for in-state dispensaries or messages from out-of-state dispensaries. They're totally banned as well. You also won't see any billboards within 1,500 feet of a school, and you will only see electronic messaging between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. It has also banned commercial gifting of cannabis in exchange for jacked up prices for goods with the bonus of a cannabis gift. And Massachusetts has plenty of restrictions on marketing and advertising as well. And Ron Marshalsea has our report from the Bay State.
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The recreational marijuana sales in the Bay State are approaching $3 billion. Between November 5th, 2018 and April 10th, 2022, according to data from the Cannabis Control Commission, retailers reported $2.87 billion in sales. Speaking of the recreational sales in the state, on April 20th, also known as 420, according to the Massachusetts CCC website, there was $6 million in marijuana sales on that day alone. And actual cannabis bud outsells the rest of the product available in the Bay State by a significant margin. And finally, the Massachusetts Cannabis Advisory Board is looking to get a jumpstart on regulatory overview in time for the start of the 2023 legislative session next winter. Sean Collin, Executive Director of the CCC and Chair of the Cannabis Advisory Board, was quoted as saying, "We're a 5-year-old agency. We modified regulations at the outset. We've also modified our regulations several times since then. The reason being is advancing, learning, and evolving. We have the benefit right now of having a complete set of regulations. There's not some glaring absence at this point. At the same time, it's just good healthy hygiene to take another look." From now until the end of summer, the commissioners and the rest of the agency will internally look at specific regulations that could potentially be created or updated. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
And finally, there are 2 research reports to leave you thinking about what is in that CBD product you just bought. Leaf Report conducted a study of 52 different CBD sleep products delivered through tincture, gummies, and capsules. And sure enough, the report conducted by the Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs says 2/3 of the tested products said to contain melatonin were mislabeled. 1 had none, and over half had inaccurate CBD levels, and almost half claiming CBN were inaccurate levels as well. The report concludes that level inaccuracies and mislabeling contribute to lack of control in the CBD industry and called for more testing of products. Okay, the other research study was on the controversial driving under the influence category that is still one of the biggest obstacles for federal reform. In a study of self-reported drivers under the influence of cannabis in legal states, the researchers found that current cannabis users in recreational and medical-only cannabis states were significantly less likely to report driving within 3 hours of getting high compared to current users living in states without legal cannabis. The study was released this week in the Journal of Preventive Medicine. It concluded that cannabis prevention efforts are, quote, most needed in states without legalized cannabis, unquote. Another reason why we say it's a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly. And that's it for this week's episode of Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto reporting for Pro Cannabis Media. We'll see you next time.
Hi, my name's Tai Chang. I'm the president and founder of Aloha Green Apothecary in Hawaii. We're a vertically integrated medical cannabis company with 3 dispensaries, 1 extraction lab, and 1 cultivation center near the North Shore of Oahu. We have over 150 employees now, and we've been working with Adaptive HR to meet our human resource needs. We're super excited to work with them as we expand, and we've grown at least 2-3 times over the last 2 years. So we look forward to a good relationship with Adaptive, and come visit us in Hawaii anytime. Aloha.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Meet Caduceus Science, the alternative wellness company. You know CBD, but how about CBG, CBN? That's right, Caduceus Science produces a range of full-spectrum products, all lab-tested in small batches to maintain the highest quality of products. CaduceusScience.com. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.